For me, the Linsanity documentary was, we put our hearts into it, and everybody on the project, and we stayed true to what we wanted it to be, and it was a very special moment for me. The fact that we started, it was supposed to be a YouTube series, it ended up being an amazing documentary because Linsanity happened, which we weren't expecting to happen at all. But it's just, I shared my life with the world, and the team really helped me do that. So I'm so thankful to the team for that. And I really hope it inspires the next generation. I hope that when people watch that film, they see that anything can happen when you put your best foot forward, when you chase your dreams, and when you just overcome and persevere and keep going and wait for your moment. There's just, you never know what can happen. So it's a story about God doing a miracle. It's a story of inspiration. It's a story of hope. And that's what we're hoping to bring for the next generation.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I guess we're getting started with this. Thank you, everybody, for attending this special screening and panel discussion for Linsanity. I hope everyone has had a chance to watch or rewatch Linsanity, the documentary. It has been 10 years since what we know affectionately now referred to as Linsanity happened. I don't know about you all, but in my many years of sort of covering Asian America and all sort of the cultural aspects of that, Linsanity remains a highlight for me. It is one of my fondest memories of just the past 20 years of that I've been doing this. And I don't know about y'all, but this has been kind of a terrible week. It's sort of like, if you look at the news and everything else going on, it's been very stressful. But I've been looking forward to this all week because I could talk about Linsanity forever. I could talk about my memories of Jeremy Lin forever, because it's just a real bright spot for a lot of us. So we've got a great bunch of guests lined up. So if you've been on the chat already, if you've been sitting in on before we officially started, you've seen everybody come roll through. But we've got a great lineup of folks to just discuss Linsanity. So why don't we get started? We're going to roll through our guests in groups. So our first little pod is going to be, can I introduce Andrew Fung? He is one half of the Chinese-American duo, the Fung Brothers, comedians and hosts. They're out of Kent, Washington, and they're holding it down in the YouTube space. I think they are single-handedly responsible for repping and bringing to light the joy and the culture of the 626 in Southern California. If you remember way back when. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Happy to be here and happy to be joining with all you guys. Michelle, Cary, Ronny, you, Evan, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. In this pod, we also have Ronny Chieng. Ronny Chieng is a stand-up comedian, actor, and correspondent on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. You might have seen him in the hit worldwide movie Crazy Rich Asians, Marvel's Shang-Chi, and The Legend of the Ten Rings, and his Netflix stand-up comedy special, Asian Comedian Destroys America. Welcome, Ronny. Ronny, you on mute?
Yeah, no. Thanks for having me, guys. Love talking about my hero, Lord and Savior, Jeremy Lin. praise be to the one true Lord, Jeremy Lin.
We're here because we are fans of the Jeremy and of Linsanity. I'm rocking. Oh, you're rocking the jersey. I've got my Linsanity shirt from way back when. I've got Jeremy over here. Jeremy's head. Let's start off with this. Where were you guys? What was your recollection? What was your knowledge of Jeremy before Linsanity hit? Like, were you following him? Were you aware of this kid? What was going on in sort of your Jeremy Lin consciousness at that point?
Love this question. Andrew, go for it.
Okay. My interest in Jeremy spans years before Linsanity happens, actually, when he's playing for Harvard. I see this Facebook group that says Jeremy Lin is the Asian Michael Jordan. I'm like, who is Jeremy Lin? It's a random Facebook group started by someone at Harvard. So I click on it and I'm like, okay, Jeremy Lin, let me look up some highlights. Let me YouTube him. He has like one pickup game where he drives baseline and dunks, but it's like a very scratchy video, right? So I'm just like, I don't know. I'm like, yo, David, this guy, Jeremy Lin, he looks pretty good. And then we find out he's playing Seattle U. I'm in Seattle at the time. It's where we grow up. He's playing Seattle U. We go to a game. People think we're from Harvard because we're cheering for Jeremy. And I'm like, no, I was like, I just heard of this guy. So we see him play and I'm like, oh, this guy's pretty good. And then he goes to the NBA and like, you know, we're cheering him on. We make some YouTube videos about him. The second he is in he doesn't get drafted, but he's in G League or D League at the time. Or Summer League, sorry. And we just like make some parody videos about him. And but yeah, I mean, it's kind of like essentially, long story short, we were watching him kind of struggle through the NBA, finding his way, you know, on the Warriors and stuff like that. And him, oh, does Dallas sign him, blah, blah, blah. And then he's on the Knicks and we're on the West Coast. So we're not watching his games until we hear about that one night. It was against the Nets, actually, right?
It was
Against
the Nets, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Deron Williams, right? That was the first night. And I didn't watch that game live, but I'd heard about it right afterwards. And they're like, yo, Jeremy Lin like went off. And I was like, oh shit, I gotta watch like the rest of the games. So after that, that was like, then you know, the rest is history. So just been always looking for, you know, as a lifelong, you know, super amateur, low-level hooper myself, you know, we're always on Asian watch. Like, yo, we got an Asian basketball player. And, you know, back then, now you have all these Instagram accounts that are like covering these high schoolers that are like, okay, you know, some of hey, this guy's coming up. But I'm just like, at that time, to find an actual player that was actually in college that could make it to the NBA, that was like wild, you know? So also he played at Harvard at the time. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled. I think after Jeremy, I said like, there's probably not going to be another Jeremy like from the US for like another like 10, 15 years. I think I said 15 and we're already on year like what, 10, 11. So I don't know. In the next 4, I think we'll do for another Asian American guard.
Who you heard it here. Ronnie, how about you?
Could I request that Andrew keep his answers to 2 minutes or less because I got very limited time here. I thought I had a cooler Jeremy Lin story, but then Andrew blew out of the water by watching him in college. I was following him from Golden State because just like Andrew, I'm following every Asian, not just in basketball, but like in sports. Because when you come from Malaysia and Singapore, like we're used to not cheering for our own country. Like when you go watch the Olympics as like Malaysians, we're cheering for Asians, like any Asian first, and then as they slowly get eliminated, we like get narrowed down to like, okay, Japan. Now we're supporting Japan in the World Cup. So like when in the NBA, well, like I was always looking for like Asian people in the NBA, you know, whether it was Yao Ming, Wang Zizhi, whoever it was, and Jeremy Lin was interesting because he was the first Asian American that I picked up on. I saw him at Golden State and he was on the roster. I can't remember how I saw him on the roster, but I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I saw him, I think he got some playing time, which even seeing him on the court was like, oh man, that's unusual to even see that on court. And then I think he got like brought down to, at the time it wasn't even called the G League, it was called the D League, I think. And then he bounced around a bit. And then the next time I saw him, it was Linsanity blowing up. And I was in Australia at the time. So I was in Australia, I was going through a breakup and I was taking it out on the basketball court. Every day I would go to this stupid half court and get into fights with Filipinos and like physical fights with these Filipino guys who just beat the shit out of me because I'm not good at basketball. And I was just trying to work something out of my system. And it would be, we watch Linsanity highlights and we go play. And then when we go play, like all these kids, these non-Asian kids on the court would be like, everyone thinks they're Jeremy Lin now. All these Asians think of Jeremy Lin. And I was like, yeah, we do. We do. And then we just go nuts on the court. Yeah. And got into tons of fights because of Jeremy Lin and lost like 10 kilos of weight, just taking it out on everybody around me. And then, that was my Linsanity. What a moment in time. what a moment in time that was. You know, I don't want to get ahead of your questions, but like, what a moment in time if you think about it. In hindsight, it doesn't even seem real.
Yeah.
I had to watch the documentary again to remember. Like, it was crazy because
time.
the confluence of events, right? That this Asian American playing the NBA, playing for the Knicks, leading them to victory after victory.
It's a fairy tale. It's unreal.
Crazy,
Yeah. No, I remember that first night. That first game against the Nets. I too got the text from a friend. Yo, Jeremy Lin, he lit it up tonight, you know. And then the next day, I remember watching someone had stitched together every time Jeremy had gotten the ball on a YouTube video, and then I watched the whole thing. It was like, 5 or 6 minutes long, and watching every shot, every moment where, you know, he made a shot and his teammates were going crazy on sides.
Yeah.
That part made me tear up. Like I remember because it was Super Bowl Sunday too. I was like, I don't care what's going on in the game. I'm just watching this YouTube clip of Jeremy Lin, like, you know, and I was just tearing up because I was like, this, you can clearly see this is a moment. This is like a dream come true for Jeremy Lin and a lot of other people in this very moment.
Yeah. And we didn't think it. Sorry, continue, please. Yeah.
Well, my question is like, so this game happens and then everyone's like, oh, Jeremy just did something, right? I'm kind of wondering, at one point, do you guys feel like after that first game, did you feel, what was your feeling? Was like this, okay, that was great and that's it? Or were you like, is he going to do it again? Or this can't last? Or Jeremy Lin has arrived? Because for me, I was like, that was awesome. And if nothing else happens again, that was an amazing game. And I am so proud of this night, you know, and then but as we all know, that wasn't the end of it. So what was your guys thinking? And maybe guys, was there a moment when you guys realized that something else is happening now? This is beyond just, you know, a good game.
I should probably answer first in case Andrew runs out the clock on me, right? So because I'm not a fucking internet loser who complains more than he creates. When I watch Asian people doing something cool, I don't go, how long is this gonna last? He's getting lucky. This guy probably sucks. No one's guarding him. I go, man, this guy's doing something amazing. Even if he doesn't do it again, this is fucking amazing. But I didn't think it was I didn't know if he'd do it again, but I didn't think it was like a fluke, because I remember that first game, like, you don't score. I can't remember, what was it? He scored like 30 points, was it? Or like
25, yeah.
25. Like, you don't get to 25 points in the NBA. You know what I mean? Unless you've got something, you know, that unless something's going well, you know what I mean? So I didn't think it was like a fluke, because I'm not a internet Reddit loser. But I like to know what Andrew thinks. Because he is.
Yeah, because you know what? Because I know what they're saying. I am tapped into the internet losers. I think it was tough. It was so crazy because for the first part of his career in the NBA, he was like, so first him getting in the NBA broke stereotypes, and then him kind of sucking in the NBA was like confirming stereotypes. And then he broke the stereotypes with that night, and you were just like, oh my, already it was a whirlwind. You were like, oh my gosh. And then it was kind of reconfirming all the scouting reports about Jeremy being very fast. Oh, he's deceptively quick, blah, blah, blah. And you were like, as you know, as an Asian basketball guy, you're like, nah, he is this good. He could do it. So I think that at that time, like when he did it, it was just like, I think for me, I couldn't have thought about the future. I was just so caught up in the moment, like buying a Lin jersey that, you know, wasn't even available, but you just got it customized.
Custom made.
Yeah. And then wearing it out and just, I don't know, it was a wave, and we were just riding the wave. And whether it was like us making videos about it and doing like Jeremy Lin effect and all these skits about it, which, you know, to be honest, kind of helped our career. Even like those were some of our maybe first 10 viral videos. So I have to be like, yo, I was starting my YouTube career, my very illustrious, amazing, award-winning YouTube career, Ronny. I was starting that as Jeremy Lin was popping up. So it was kind of like, that's why it was like the stocks were riding up next. Obviously, Jeremy's was going up this, but I was like, yo, we're following. Yeah. So it was crazy, man. And it was, just people asking us about it and just trying to like, we were in LA at the time. But wild times.
A couple, like last week or so, The Ringer put up this article about the 10-year anniversary of Linsanity, and Pablo Torre had a great quote, which kind of summed up for me, like the feeling of Linsanity, of why it was so great, was something to the effect of, it was like we felt like we were the stars of our own movie, and for once while watching these games, and I feel like for a lot of people, a lot of fans, it was just like this moment where like I could see myself, and we talk about representation all the time. But this was, I feel like, just a pure moment of representation where you're like, I see myself in this, and you can tell, like that's, and it was a moment where it also transcended Asian American representation, because everybody got caught up in this, right? It was global, like the city of New York was, and then across the country. I mean, people had the fever, What and I don't know. You guys were, neither of you guys were in New York at this time, but I'm wondering what you guys were feeling. Andrew, I think you were in Southern California, right?
Yeah, I was in LA, and I don't want to go ahead, Ronnie, so that I can have my long answer.
I was in Australia. I can tell you it was going off in Australia.
Tell us about what was it, Melbourne, Sydney? Where were you at?
Yeah, I was in Melbourne at the time. I mean, I was kind of touring Australia, and some, you see it would come up everywhere. Like some comic called named her show Linsanity. Like we would be on the court, like I said, people would talk about it because he would just score 50 points, and then someone would be like, Jeremy Lin scored 50 points. Not every Asian thinks that Jeremy Lin. It would come up in day-to-day conversation.
Did you do any jokes about Jeremy, about it?
I think I did, but it was very basic. It was like I couldn't even find a way. It was such a new phenomenon that I couldn't find a way to get like everyone in Australia. I couldn't understand how to get white people to understand what it meant. Right. To because like Phil just said, like it's such a rare phenomenon for everyone to get behind like a sporting personality like that. So my only joke I had was something about how I was trying to make like, it's something about making Asian people cool again. And, Jeremy Lin is great, but we need more. And I would, I used him as like a tag. I'm sorry, Jeremy. I couldn't find a great punch. But my point is that there was no way to express what was going on in my head to the wider public in Australia, because it was like going on beyond words almost.
Right.
So it's been 10 years. And since then, I mean, whole ass humans have been born and our older kids now, the 9-year-old kid, they did not live through Linsanity. How would you describe Linsanity to say like a 7 to 8-year-old kid who wasn't there?
Just imagine if a basketball player in the NBA was of Asian descent and was scoring 40 points a game and leading the Knicks to victory right now. It's the same. It's the same feeling. It would be the same feeling.
Yeah, I think I would have to just throw them all the videos in the documentary to give them that feeling. I think those videos in the documentary definitely capture the energy of it and like the magnitude of it. And I think, and we have to be honest, as Asians and non-Asians, like Goran Dragic, during that same season, he was actually having a really good run. I believe he was on Phoenix.
He's one of my favorite players.
Yeah, Goran is great. Goran's a good player. Like,
he was on the MVP. He was like number 5.
He's on the Nets now. Yeah.
Yeah, he's on the Nets now. But at that season you're talking about, he was like the 5th in MVP.
Yeah.
Voting.
And I think it was fused with like Asian representation and Asian activism and Asians just kind of being so starved for somebody like this, where it was like when we heard all the criticism being like, oh, why does he deserve to be on Sports Illustrated, or like, guys, this isn't that big of a deal. Goran's dropping. He's on a good run too. Like stat wise, equally a good run, but he wasn't on the Knicks and he wasn't maybe hitting game winners and he wasn't this and that, he's like a smaller market team. And so many other factors. I'm not saying Jeremy wasn't actually still playing better, but it was similar. And it's like, when you heard those things, it was kind of like, I was so in the moment. I was like arguing with losers on the internet, Ronnie, like, just like, no, what are you talking about?
Asian internet losers?
Huh?
Asian internet losers? Is that what?
No, I'm pretty sure they were non-Asian because they were
Okay.
fans. Yeah.
Right.
But it was just like, it became kind of this sort of like defend your Asian bro thing. And you were like, nah, man, even if like in your mind, you were like, yeah, if Jeremy did that on the Milwaukee Bucks at that time, it would have been still a big deal, but just not in the media storm, like being in New York on the Knicks, right? That's like the perfect team. Like, that's why we say it's a crazy.
Yeah, that's why Linsanity was so crazy. It's the confluence of so many different things, right? Because in sports, like, sports is objective. You know what I mean? There's a metric. It's a numerical metric. You score the points or you didn't. You know what I mean? Like, you can measure it. You know what I mean? You can measure the success. And so when you bring in, like, we admire him because he's Asian, like the counter arguments of like, is he good? Is he good? Who cares about his race? Is he good? But for so many of us, it was like, yeah, it's because he's Asian. It's because he's Asian. It's like, yeah, of course, it's because the guy's Asian. You know, of course. Why wouldn't you get behind him? Why wouldn't you get behind him? How could you not get behind this kid? How could you not? What fucking loser on the internet could look at what was happening and go, this sucks? Like, how could you not, you know what I mean? How can you not get behind this feel-good story? Even Jeremy himself personally, you know, he's such a positive guy. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of piece of shit do you have to be to look at that and go like,
we almost got in a fight with this white guy who we were at this bar we had done a show at USC, and then there was like, we were all hanging out at this bar, and I think one of us had our Knicks Lin jersey on, and then this white kid who like comes up to us and is like, Jeremy Lin sucks. And we all stood up and we were like, well, first of all, so we like got in his face and it almost went down, but we're like, but why'd you say that though? You know, like almost saying that in that moment to us, that's like, it's racist. Like in a vacuum, it's not, right, on paper, right? Like, I get it. I've had way worse racist things, more directly racist. But when you come up to a group of Asians guys and you're like, Jeremy Lin sucks, and then his favorite player turned out to be like Larry Bird, like super stereotypical. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, you're clearly coming here to disrespect us, not to actually have a basketball discussion about his advanced metrics or like, you know, like, you know, how he's scoring like the most of any like first 5 starts. Right. You know, first of all, you can make a record for anything, but that is a record that Jeremy has. So shout out to him. But, you know, I'm just saying those kind of feelings were running so high. So yeah, we were about to like.
Phil, sorry to hijack the discussion here, but I did a panel with Jeremy a couple of years ago. That's where I first met him in Chinatown. And the Fung Brothers, I can't believe David Fung actually came up with a really good point that he said something actually quite considered and reasonable. He said we were in Chinatown at the Mocha event. Jeremy Lin came to do a panel. You know, a lot of Chinatown came up, parents and their kids, all these fans. And I remember David going like, all these Asian American parents loving Jeremy Lin. Everybody here loves Jeremy Lin. But how many of these parents would, if their kid wanted to be the next Jeremy Lin, how many of these parents would be as encouraging to their kids, you know? And I guess my broader point is like, one of the reasons we love Jeremy Lin so much is because we know what he had to go through. I mean, we know what he had to go through. Not only do we know the shit he had to go through, because as we're watching him, we know Asian people are giving him shit even as we're watching him. You know what I mean? Like, we know, because you know, inside everyone has that weird like, you think you're good enough? Like, what makes you think you're good enough to do this? What makes you so special to do this? You know what I mean? And so I guess my point is like, that's another reason why we rallied behind him, because we personally went through, all of us have gone through our mini battles.
And going off of that real quick, it basically kind of does spark a potential shift in young Asian parents' minds, where now, not that there's, all the kids are going to be Jeremy Lin, like hell no, right? But like, whoa, like, are you okay with your kid trying to get there? like trying to play varsity basketball, trying to maybe play D2, D3 ball, you know, if they have the opportunity. Like you were saying, and going off of what me and David were talking about at that time, is like, yo, would these Asian parents really support their kid if they wanted to go into sports? And not just Jeremy, like as a guy, but, you know, just any, if you have a daughter, that's good too.
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
forget sports. I mean,
Anything that's off the beaten path.
right? That's a little bit off the beaten
Right.
path, right?
I think they'd let them do it if they went to Harvard first. I mean, that's, you know.
Well, Jeremy, you know, to be honest, his parents are actually super supportive. That's the thing that a lot of people think. They're like, oh, he made him get good grades and get the SATs. But it's like, as far as basketball went, they supported that dream all the way for all three of their boys, you know?
Right.
So I think that a lot of people kind of overlook that aspect, and they're just like, oh, Jeremy like popped out the womb, like just doing, you know, cutting to the rack, you know? But I'm like, no, like his parents like still actually bred him in a way that other sports parents do, but it looked different, but they really did, you know?
Right. If
think
you watch the
even
documentary, you can see that Jeremy's dad is an old school like NBA fan. When he was in Taiwan, you know, he's a fan of like Kareem Skyhook, and so like, you know, he's a different kind of like, you know, Taiwanese American
Taiwanese
parent.
fathers love basketball, like Taiwan especially. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
All right, guys, this is our time for this segment. So if you guys got to run, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next.
Thank you so much.
Our next guest, but thank you,
Yo,
Andrew.
hold up,
Okay.
Ronny, Andrew, I'm sorry. I'm listening to y'all talk, and I wanted to throw something out there. I apologize, but I wanted to light something that I knew would be really interesting to y'all, because I remember when Jeremy Lin was still blowing up, and we talked about all those haters, Ronny, Andrew, like on the webs, talking. I used to be in journalism, no longer now, but there was a pretty prominent journalist, Jason Whitlock. Some of y'all might remember. And Jason Whitlock, when Asian folks didn't have a lot of representation, said some things not too pleasant. If you all recall, he tweeted out,
No, yeah.
You remember this? What I see Andrew nodding your head, like
The dick joke.
the dick joke. He's like on Twitter, he's like, somebody's about after Jeremy Lin just dropped down the buzzer beater in Toronto, 2 steps, hugged Steve Novak, everybody celebrating. Jason Whitlock goes to Twitter, he's like, yo, some lucky lady's gonna feel like 2 inches of pain or something like that tonight. Like straight to all this old school stereotypical representation problems that we had. And I just wanted to get y'all's take on that really quick before, you know, I know you guys are busy, but I knew that's something that you'd have probably an interesting perspective on. Sorry.
Cary trying to start some shit here.
Yeah, no, just rolling in hot.
I mean,
I'm just surprised Jason Whitlock survived through COVID.
I wasn't on Twitter at the time, so I didn't even know that. I wasn't in America at the time, so I didn't know that happened. But that's a fucking dumb thing to tweet, and so fuck him for saying that.
Yeah,
Ronnie's
10
way
years
better
later.
at saying "fuck you" to things than me, so I like the way Ronnie cusses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Get behind me then. Get behind my cuss.
Yeah. What
I'll
you
protect
said.
everybody.
I mean,
you guys don't have to say it. I'll say it for you.
Yeah,
Fuck Jason Whitlock.
But I think just real quick before I go, and so I don't go on for like 15 minutes, but like I think that it just went to remind people that like how little non-Asians understood it. Obviously, shout out to the non-Asians who did understand it and who are always supporting, but there was just so many prominent voices and people who had a platform. SAS, he didn't say, Stephen A, he didn't say as much disrespectful things, but he was very, very critical of Jeremy at the time as well, you know? And I think that it was just hurting us because we had a hero that fit the bill. That was almost like too good of an example. Harvard basketball player, lighting it up. It was almost like too good to be true, other than the fact that maybe he wasn't like dating all the hottest models at the time. And, you know, I think some people wish he did, but like, regardless of that, I mean, God, we're asking too much, guys. So I was just like, yo, like at this moment when we have a hero, there's all these people who are trying to be snarky and take all the shots at him when I'm like, and I think we had to let them know like that wasn't a good career move. I'm not saying he got fired. I don't think he got fired off that, right? It wasn't that bad, but he got like, I'm sure he got a warning and was like, yo, don't do that. Like, don't do that shit. Why?
And I really want to hear from Michelle and Cary. I think, but just as a final sign off, I think like we're all fans of Jeremy Lin here. So this is almost preaching to a choir a little bit, but like, this idea that like, you know, I still look back at Linsanity with amazement, right? It's such a moment in time. I think in hindsight, after Linsanity kind of ended, quote unquote, there's kind of a lot of criticism at Jeremy for various reasons. Maybe not most of us here, because like I said, we're all true fans. A lot of criticism towards him, whether it was his game or his inability to sustain Linsanity or whatever his attitude. But it's just like my true feeling when I met Jeremy Lin for the first time at Mocha about 4 or 5 years ago when he was playing for Brooklyn, I was like, this guy doesn't owe anyone anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He doesn't owe us having tattoos. He doesn't owe us punching Chris Paul in the face. He played the game his way, and that's his personality, you know, and that's who he is. And so, you know, everyone wanting him to be something that he wasn't, that's on us. That's on, I mean, us, you know,
We're
we're all
projecting,
fans,
right?
so us, but that's on the people wanting him to be something else.
Mhm.
If you wanted him to be something else other than he was, you're guilty of that same Asian hate that I presume that you blame other people for. You know what I mean? Because that's a form of self-hating as well, because we expected him to solve every single racial problem that Asian people face in America. We wanted him to go punch Kenyon Martin in the face or whatever. We were like channeling him to, you know, but that's not who he was. You know what I mean? That's not who he is. And I've gotten to know him a bit more. In fact, I dare say we're best friends now. You can quote me on that. And he stayed the same dude. He is the same down-to-earth, positive guy, you know, that he was when he was giving press conferences as a kid, straight out of Harvard. So I love Jeremy Lin. I really want to hear from Cary and Michelle though. So
All right.
Well, Ronnie, you bring up a good point. I'm just going to jump in real quick. I think that it pisses
Hold
people
on,
off.
Michelle, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but can we make a clean transition over here? Because I want to introduce you guys proper, right?
Sure.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Andrew and Ronnie. Michelle Yu is an Emmy award-winning sports anchor. She was at SNY, the home of the Mets, for 10 years. And prior to that, she was an anchor and reporter on NY New York One News. She is the first Asian female sportscaster in New York. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi.
You share a name with my cousin, Michelle Yu. So
I wonder if we're related somehow, you know, but you never know.
Cary Chow, he was one of the first Chinese Americans to anchor at a national sports network. He is a broadcast journalism veteran for nearly 2 decades. He's a former host of SportsCenter, whose work includes ESPN, MSNBC, and NBC Washington. He interviewed Jeremy Lin and wrote extensively about Linsanity when he was at ESPN. Welcome, Cary.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone here, for joining. It's awesome to be a part of this.
Michelle, I interrupted you. You had a thought. I want you to continue.
I don't know if I fully remember the thought. I think, you know, hopping off of what, you know, Andrew and Ronnie were saying, I think it pissed a lot of people off that Jeremy Lin didn't turn into something else. He was always true to himself, true to who he was. And I think a lot of people in the NBA, some players, they end up changing, but Jeremy Lin didn't. And I think you saw it kind of right away. I don't know if it was him changing or not, but Amari Stoudemire did say one time, he said, you know what, not everyone on this team is happy about what they've seen come out of Jeremy Lin. I mean, how could you not be happy after seeing Linsanity happen? But there were people out there that thought that the whole Linsanity thing was BS. And, you know, I'm not going to name any names. A lot of people have said Carmelo Anthony was jealous because, you know, that was a stint where he kind of took the spotlight away from Carmelo for a little while in 2012. And they said it was him that was jealous. But it was disappointing to see that Carmelo Anthony was such a superstar for the Knicks at that point, and that he was not the most supportive person of Jeremy Lin during that time.
I think it's easy for, look, everyone has an opinion about Linsanity from all angles. One thing that, were you guys both in New York at the time during Linsanity?
Yeah.
Cary, you weren't.
No.
So here's the thing. I was thinking about how the doc, we know so much about Jeremy Lin now. We watched the documentary, we read all these articles about him, the couch he was on, all the little the details of every game. I think one thing that does not really get enough press is how much Jeremy Lin and Linsanity meant to, like, on the ground, the community at the time with sports fans, like just that sort of like the fervor that everybody got caught up in. And then how much that might have actually affected like decisions that were made, that the opinions that other players had, that kind of stuff, sort of the collective public, the thing that get away from that people that Jeremy has no control over, you know what I mean? Outside of the game, you know, could you guys give us a little bit of what you thought were, as people covering this time, a little bit of the flavor of like, of that, you know, and like, and the decisions on how to cover Linsanity, you know, how that was affected?
I have two quick thoughts on that one. I'll start with one, and then I'll toss it over. But I remember at ESPN, and I hadn't joined ESPN when Linsanity first started happening, but our former colleague at ESPN, Myungmasa, made this very clear, and he was telling me about First Take, just a show with Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless at the time that some of us have just mentioned. And when Linsanity was happening, we had someone came on who is actually a friend of mine who is of Asian descent, but his single representation on that show was that it wasn't a big deal. And it was so outrageous because we as a collective have been waiting for this opportunity for such a long time. And as Ronny had just mentioned, we've been projecting so many feelings about having zero visibility. Like this, so much of this is about visibility, right? Not being visible in this pop culture space. And when it came to First Take, the one time we've got this amazing story on so many different levels, representing the Asian American, which is a different like representation than Yao Ming, right? That we're not 7'6" gigantic like athletes coming from China. Like we don't all have that. Jeremy Lin was much more relatable in that aspect, especially as an Asian American. And so when he came up and on First Take, they downgraded the single representation. Like they downgraded that. It was like, no, we can't do this. We can't. This is a fail. I will also say on that end, the famous chink in the armor line on ESPN.com. And I know there were two incidents of chink in the armor at ESPN. One was a headline. And the person, if you know this interesting story about chink in the armor here, is that the person who did the headline became somebody I just saw in the chat said became a priest. That person did become a priest. And they did not mean that to be like derogatory in any way. The problem is because we have not had the visibility about our issues, they didn't even think to make 1-in-1 and say that you can't be done. They can't even, the concept of having an Asian American and having chink in a headline, like it didn't even occur to them, because even though we all know how bad it is, they were so clueless to our representation. So I would even make this weird argument that it was a good thing, because that started to get that conversation started to say, hey, like, we can't have this happen. This is 2012 at this point. We can't be using that word. But yet, as far as that pushed the envelope, we've noticed in this past couple years, like, we're not as far as we thought we were when it came to all the Asian hate that we've been dealing with. So a couple quick thoughts on that one. But Michelle, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, it's interesting, you know, I was at SNY at the time covering, you know, I cover all New York sports, went to those games and, you know, anchored, you know, the nights that Linsanity went bonkers. And I have to say, there's two elements to this, you know, as a New York City sportscaster, to see this unfold was amazing, because you go to a bar, you saw Asians flocking everywhere, wearing the Jeremy Lin jersey, rocking it loud and proud. And it was just an amazing sight to see. On my days off, I would go to the bar and watch, and I would just see all these Jeremy Lin fans, all these Asians out. Normally you would never see them at, I don't know, McDonald's, you know, I don't know, some Irish pub. They're there watching these games, getting in, getting excited. And I loved it. And I think there was also an extra pep in people's steps in Chinatown, in Flushing, on the playgrounds, the city playgrounds. You saw the older generation look at Jeremy Lin, talk about Jeremy Lin like hey, that's like my son, like he's doing well, he's representing us, he's giving us hope, he's inspiring us. And then you have the younger generation, you have the younger kids wearing the t-shirts, rocking the jersey, saying, you know, I want to be him. It was a wonderful sight for an Asian to see. For an Asian to cover it, on the other hand, at my station, I was a little disappointed, because echoing, you know, what Cary said, you know, they didn't want to make a big deal out of it, because I feel like if it was somebody else, they may have made a bigger deal out of it. I mean, it was Linsanity. We all know how big it was to our culture, to our, you know, our community. So it was funny because I remember, you know, I had a producer, you know, when I would anchor the show and Linsanity would lead the show, it'd be like, oh, I know you're gonna write it up and you're gonna, like, you know, blow it up. Yeah, I am gonna blow it up because it is big news. Not just like, why is he saying that to me? Well, what do you think? You know, and I was proud to write it up. And it was the first time, I think, covering New York sports, there was a personal interest in it, because I wanted my representation to be represented the right way. And that was what Jeremy Lin did. And I think it really opened doors for so many people in New York. Listen, New York City is the mecca of basketball. MSG is the mecca of basketball. And when Jeremy Lin does that there, it's a big deal.
I remember the game against the Lakers where Jeremy dropped 38, and I'm living in Los Angeles, so I was watching from there, riveted. And I remember I could not go to sleep that night because it was so exciting. It was just so, I mean, like, because that week leading up to it, you kind of think like, oh my God, he's doing great. Like, oh my God, at least we have this one game. No, we have these two games. These games are like, these are so magical. And it felt like that Laker game was going to be the true test. And you're like, this is a dream. I cannot believe this just happened. I can't believe he lit it up like this in Madison Square Garden. And so that I'll always remember, like, going to, like, I couldn't go to sleep. And when I woke up, it was like the first thing on my mind because it was so unreal. I think you guys touched upon something that's so interesting in that, and we're seeing these issues transposed on a lot of stuff that we're dealing with in current events now, which is pretty bad. But a way that there's a parallel is that when Asians are so invisible for so long in a place like professional sports, when we go to hyper visibility all of a sudden in the case of something like Linsanity, I think most people have not developed a vocabulary or a sense of just how to talk about Asians in a normal way that doesn't involve the 5 things that you know about Asians, which are martial arts, Chinese food, you know, like penis jokes and stupid shit like that, you know? And so it's why you saw a rash of just these really bad jokes and puns and, you know, just off-color stuff. And it's like, I feel like when that's at its worst, I mean, we're just talking about basketball there, but like, we're talking about the way we talk about ourselves, you know, and when we don't have a voice to define how we are defined and tell our stories, like someone else is going to do it for us. And you see that now in terms of like violence against Asians. A lot of this has to do with the fact that we don't have agency over how our stories are told, you know, and it develops into all sorts of different kinds of image making and perceptions and stereotypes that lead to this kind of what we're seeing now is like straight up violence, right? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. As people, we talked a little bit about it before, but like some of the sort of negative aspects of the way that Jeremy was covered.
It's one real quickly, Phil, about Kobe and the Lakers and Jeremy Lin. You nodded, you know, because Kobe leading up to that was also like, Jeremy Lin, who's Jeremy? I don't know. Somebody asked him like, hey, what do you make of Jeremy Lin and what he's doing? Who's that? I don't know who that is. Yo, and Jeremy kept that in mind when he was dropping that 38. And now obviously, you know, Kobe remembered who he was then. But so yeah, going back to your question about like, but the representation, I think what happens for representation is key in these 3 main fields. In from what I've noticed is 1, government. You need someone to represent you in government to get your voice out there. 2, education. We need to know what's happening about these different groups and cultures and so forth, right? What did we know about what were we taught in regular standard American curriculum about Japanese internment camps, about those types of things, about Asian American history? Not that much. So that's more invisibility. And then pop culture, which goes into not just sports, right, but entertainment. Because when I lived in Wyoming, I lived in Alabama, people aren't like, I heard some racist stuff, but a lot of times it wasn't like out of like vitriol. It was out of ignorance. Like, there's no Asian people around. How do I learn about you? Well, I don't have any government representation. I'm not going to learn about you that way. Well, I don't learn about you in school, so I don't know about. So where am I going to find out about you? Pop culture. That's how I'm going to find out about you. So with all those three, if we're not represented, we're going to constantly have that visibility issue. So when things like Jeremy Lin do pop up and we have this chink in the armor conversation, it's like, okay, all of a sudden, oh man, the rest of us, while our population have been dealing with this for such a long time, so many others are suddenly like, oh, we have to play catch up. And I will also say there's a part of me that's like, sometimes this is a very differing opinion, but sometimes I feel like we have to offer a little bit of like leeway, because sometimes people just don't know. And sometimes that will result in questions being that are ignorant, but they're not mean-spirited and they're not, so we have to extend that. Now, obviously social media, and going to Ronnie's point about this, the hate, like that's kind of I don't even want to touch that, right? But if you're in a genuine conversation, and everyone here on this panel we're legitimately talking about this because we want to know more, right? We about each other's issues and so forth, and about representation. I think Jeremy Lin and Linsanity and events like this, Crazy Rich Asians, you name it. It is so important for not just our generation, because we've been dealing with that invisibility for such a long time, but we now know like this next generation is not going to be dealing with that because of all these baby steps. I don't even call them baby steps, right? They're giant leaps that people like Jeremy, even Ronnie, Andrew, like Phil, like Michelle, like all like what y'all are doing, like that helps move the ball forward. I know that's kind of a ramble, but I feel like it's important to say.
I totally agree with Cary. I think there, between Linsanity, which was 10 years ago, till now, I think there has been a significant change in Asian voices. I think back then, and Cary, I think you wrote about this. Jeremy once said, he said, there was a point in my career where I was kind of tired of people just kind of labeling me as Asian. I didn't really want to deal with it. I didn't really want to talk about it. But now looking back, I wish I would have embraced it. Oh, I'm paraphrasing. I wish I would have embraced it a little more and been more, like a Naomi Osaka now, where she's really out there, creating a voice. I mean, I always say this in New York City. We have an Al Sharpton here in New York City who always has a voice for the African-American community. We don't have that for Asian Americans here or anywhere really, but we're beginning to see, as Cary mentioned, step-by-step, baby steps, one person here, one person there, coming together, and we are seeing change. And I think that that's wonderful. What I would have liked to see Jeremy back then was if he, since he had that spotlight, since he had that moment, to really take that and run with it and do more. But I totally, after seeing also the Linsanity documentary, you could understand why he was hesitant to do so and didn't want to change, as Ronnie said himself, as he shouldn't change who he was. But I like how the needle is being moved now because of the small minor changes with Crazy Rich Asians, with people like Aquafina, now with Simu and Marvel, and all the stuff that we're seeing. Everyone is pitching in the Asian American community, putting their voice in, and that's creating a change in a positive direction.
So much of that.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just wanted to piggyback of everything Michelle said. Like, this is such a big +1, and then the projection though that we have, right, that we put on these others, because Jeremy, and we also have to factor in age. Like, Jeremy was 23. Like, I have now, like, the balance of, like, the first time I interviewed Jeremy, I was just over, and I wrote about this for The Undefeated. I was just over 30, and all of those feelings of like, oh my God, I love this guy so much. I'm a journalist, so I'm gonna be cool, but holy shit, it's Jeremy fucking Lin. And I'm like, I get to interview you and talk to you about Linsanity. And I have all this Asian stuff that I want to talk to you about. Like, what's it like being this hero for so many people? In that time, he was like, yo, thanks, man. Like, I remember after the interview, and it's not professional. Like, that's the thing when, as journalists, like, you know, you got to be professional. You don't show your cards, but at the same time, like, for people who've never been in that sphere and don't have the representation, you know, that you say, like, act like you've been there before, but hell, we've never been to this dance before. So how do I know to act that way? So when I see Jeremy, and like, after we do the interview, I was like, yo, for real, I really love what you're doing out there, man. So much, it's awesome. And he was just like, cool, man. And he walked off. And yo, I get that. He's young. And in 2 weeks, his entire life changed, right? You on Time Magazine, you were sleeping on a couch, and now you're on Time Magazine. Like, for us to project all the stuff that we want on him, and then as he says now, like, he looks back and regrets, like, he wishes he took that ball forward. But like, none of it, like, we don't know what we're gonna be like in those types of situations. Like, so it is kind of unfair to kind of throw those things that I was doing, that I was guilty of, right? Like, throwing those types of thoughts at him, because it is all projection, and it's, you got to look at it like, oh, that's on me.
I think going back to what you said, Michelle, about like, we have no, I always hear like people say like, we need like, oh, we need our version of Al Sharpton to be the one who, to, you know, pick up the megaphone. And for me, I'm like, that's all of us. It has to be all of us, actually. You know, there's no one person, and Jeremy Lin's not the one who's going to do it. You know, we can't rely on just one guy. He's doing his thing in his own way. We kind of all have to be the people. And there's Jeremy Lin certainly shows there's no one way to be Asian American, right? There's no one way to be an athlete, and there's no one way to be a journalist, right? An Asian American journalist. So I always say is like, you know, if Linsanity has shown anything, is like, we all have our different ways of sort of being Asian American. Whereas what we did all come together and celebrate this one thing. And that I think that is what is so special about that moment, in that we could all get on board with like, this was amazing. All right, before we move on to the next, our next guest and next like segment of this, you guys could be with, well, before I say that, to circle back to that Kobe moment where Kobe's like, I don't know who that is. I do want to say, the person who asked Jeremy after that Laker game, in the press room, who asked him, so do you think Kobe knows who you are now? That was my friend Jeff, one of my best friends, Jeff Yang, who had the gall to ask that in the press room. But I want to ask you guys, what is your favorite Linsanity moment? A single moment, doesn't have to be a game either. It could be a something that a piece of culture or whatever that happened.
Well, my favorite game of his was definitely Valentine's Day, the Toronto game, the game winner. I mean, he just ran with it. He just said, you know, and after seeing, you know, his documentary, you saw all the events leading up to a moment like that. He says, you know what? I have the ball. There's 15 seconds. I'm taking it. And I think at that moment, all of us as Asian Americans, and people who are dreamers, they felt like, hey, I could envision myself in this moment. And I think that was such a powerful moment. And you saw, it was a game in Toronto, but you saw how all the crowd in Toronto, a lot of Asians in Toronto, as you guys know, they were all into it. And I think that was an awesome moment to see. And it was like, for me, the culmination of Linsanity, him sinking that buzzer beater.
No, same. And then also, like, it was 15 seconds and he was just dribbling it out at the logo, like 10 seconds, 9.
5.
Yeah. Like, all right, maybe I should do something on you know, pull up drop. It was, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And just the straight panda moment. It's weird sometimes, like, I don't know about y'all, and especially I've been feeling this as I get older, but I will get emotional, like weirdly emotional about things that I don't even think I'd be emotional about. And those are those types of moments where it's like, I have these, I don't want to call them repressed. They're not repressed feelings, but you just have these feelings that start coming out that you didn't even realize like how much something actually meant to you. And that was like, I remember specifically watching Jeremy hit that buzzer beater, and I was like, yo, why am I feeling this way? Like it was all of that. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And then the fact that
say you have a chill, but I did have a chill watching that.
I sincerely believe that buzzer beater, we all, as an entire community, we all guided that ball into that net together, to collectively, from our hearts. The energy just carried it, because that moment was just like, I mean, come on, like, is there any way to sort of cap? Because I also believe that was kind of the ceremonial end of Linsanity proper for me, like that fairy tale run. And so, yeah, what a perfect shot, you know.
So you're saying we should all take credit for that, Phil? Is
yeah,
that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Not that much, but just a little. Everyone gets a little bit. Yeah. All right. Cary, Michelle, I just want to thank you guys for taking part. I'm going to welcome you guys to stick around if you want to like hang out and join, keep on going. But I want to now welcome Alex Niu. He's coming to us for international. Alex.
Hi.
Alex Niu is a celebrity host based in Taiwan who has hosted competition shows such as Fear Factor Taiwan, Extreme Taiwan Trekkers, as well as numerous NBA player events in Asia. Alex, you're coming at us, giving us the international perspective. I know that you're pretty entrenched in sort of the sports scene in Taiwan, where I know basketball, and the Linsanity documentary kind of shows shades of this, where like basketball is hot, and there's a scene there that people should take seriously. And Jeremy Lin also has a relationship, a big relationship there as well. Let's take us back to Linsanity. What was your first inkling of Jeremy Lin as a player? And then when did you first start hearing about what's going on with Linsanity?
First of all, hi to Phil and all the other panelists today. I'm joining everybody from Taiwan. It's early morning here. My name is Alex, and I'm glad to be here and to kind of bring back some of the happiest moments in sports history for me.
Yeah.
I'm a kind of like a host for sports events. Those are my core kind of jobs. So I've hosted Michael Jordan, Kobe events, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Rafael Nadal, all sorts of stars from all over the world. And I think when I try to kind of put Linsanity into it, I always tell my friends, Linsanity at that moment, there's Michael Jordan, who's kind of like the god. He's the icon. And the Michael Jordan event I hosted like 10, 12 years, it was just nuts. And I would slot Linsanity right in between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Like
wow.
At that moment, 10, 12 years ago, that was something that was just off the hook here in Taiwan. Because, I mean, he has a history. His parents are from Taiwan. People felt that he was a brother, a son, a cousin. And it was just nuts. Everybody here was talking about it. You know, like, I think there's people that transcend sports, and Jeremy was that for the Taiwanese public. And then I don't want to keep saying it was Taiwanese. It was for everyone. And I think Cary talked about it before. Some of the panelists talked about it before. Everybody, and Ronny talked about it before. Anybody who was Asian, this was kind of like this beacon and said, here's our shot. This is it. This is our moment. So I think for everyone, 10 years ago, Linsanity was this coming out party. And it was this proud moment. It was a joyous moment. It was a moment where everybody said, man, I'm a baller. And for a moment, I was actually a New York Knicks fan, which is against my blood. I'm a diehard Lakers fan.
Wow.
And there's nothing worse than cheering for the Knicks. But for those 25 games, I put down my Lakers jersey and I said, this is my boy, you know? And contrary to what I think Michelle said, MSG is not the mecca of basketball. LA and Boston is the mecca of basketball. MSG hasn't been the mecca of basketball in 40 years. But
we have some disagreement here.
for that moment, I mean, Linsanity was something that allowed everybody to be proud, allowed everybody to be in the conversation. I think it allowed everybody to agree from a basketball perspective on something. And I think that was very important. It united all Asians, especially in Taiwan. You know, everybody was happy. There was no, you know, a lot of times anytime you have a discussion, there's 50-50. You know, this was one moment where everybody was just united. It was a fantastic thing.
Yeah. Can you give me a sense of Jeremy Lin's profile prior to Linsanity, like in Taiwan? Where, you know,
in Taiwan, I think that you have these diehard basketball fans, and this is demographically across the board. I'm sure in the U.S., people knew he was on the radar because, you know, he dropped 30 points on Kemba Walker and Harvard, and people knew he was, if you were a diehard basketball fan. And if you were Asian, you would follow. There's not many Asians in basketball, obviously, right?
Right.
When I grew up, I play basketball. When I grew up, I always tell people, when I grew up, there was no Jeremy Lin. When I grew up in LA, and there was this guy, Richard Chang, who played at Berkeley. This is like in the late 80s. And Richard Chang was every Asian American kid's idol. There was Richard Chang, who played at Berkeley for a very brief time. And there was a guy named Tony Wang, who actually played at UCLA for just a couple of games. And these two guys were our heroes because that's all we had. And we would be in the playground going, I'm Tony Wang, I'm Richard Chang, you know, and that was our Jeremy. And then these guys got to college, and that was kind of like our glass ceiling, because college was it. You know, and then a few other guys later on played college ball. There was a guy named Jerry Liu down in LA, and a guy named Conan Chi, who's one of my friends up in the Bay Area. And they kind of started playing ball. And then you had all these kids started playing college basketball. But for 10 years, that was another ceiling. And then when we heard about this kid, Jeremy, who was blowing it up at Palo Alto, leading his high school to beat Mater Dei. I'm from LA. Mater Dei is the powerhouse.
Yes.
Beat Mater Dei in the CIF finals. We're like, who is this kid? And I think some of the panelists said it before. You still were kind of skeptical, like, okay, he had a good team, and then he played at Harvard, and then you started noticing as his accolades started piling up. So I think in Taiwan, people kind of knew he was, but it was just one of those things where, like, okay, at the time, I don't remember if people remember, Yao Ming was kind of like nearing the end of his illustrious career. And there was kind of this vacuum for, we wanted an Asian basketball player. So I think people started following Jeremy, you know, but obviously nobody knew it was going to be that New York moment, that Linsanity moment, but people knew who he was. But obviously, right when he started playing in the Linsanity, people started reading. I think for Asians in Asia, following a lot of grassroots sports in America is difficult, right? A lot of times it's difficult because there's not that much information in their native language, localized language. But once you start hearing about it, then people start writing about it. The local beat reporters start writing about it, and you can hear about it. So I think Jeremy picked up very quick because of his background with his family and him being, you know, Taiwanese American and stuff. So I think that was a big thing. And then obviously every game during that span of 26 games during the rest of the season, people are trying to pick it up. People are watching NBA.com. People are picking it up on every feed, pirate feed, streams and everything. And we were in bars, we were in people's houses, we were on our phones. It was just some miraculous moment to bring everyone together.
What is the time difference? Were people watching it live?
Yeah, you know, people complain in the US, man, there's a game on the East Coast or the West Coast. Man, try being here. Try being here, getting up at like 8 a.m., 7 a.m. for all the East Coast games that are coming at 5. Try getting up at 7 for the Super Bowl, man. You try getting up at 4 a.m. for some games. I mean, so there's some brutal games. I get up and my wife is like, what are you doing? And I'm like, Laker game is on. And she's like, oh, okay, you know, or like a UCLA game or something. So people were getting up. The great part about Jeremy, and before Jeremy, there was like a ball player called Wang Jianming that played, you know, baseball in New York, right? There would be these kind of shopping centers or squares, these public squares in Taipei, and there'd be these big televisions. People would just sit down. I mean, we would be like shopping and people would just sit down and watch Jeremy play, right? You just sit down and watch Wang Jianming pitch. I mean, these are great moments where like society just comes together. You know, people were talking about like being in New York at the bar and all these Asians come in. And can you imagine you're just walking down the street at a red light and all of a sudden you look around and there's like 100 people sitting on the floor watching this giant screen, like in the middle of Times Square. It would blow your mind.
Yeah.
You know? And it was one of those moments where everybody started talking about, not just sports fans, and you kind of led into that. Everybody, like you would go into a store buying, I don't know, a cell phone, and the girl would be like, Alex, man, did you see Jeremy yesterday? And I'd be like, this girl's never talked to me about sports, right? I go buy some Chinese soy milk, and the guy be talking to me about Jeremy Lin. It was fantastic.
It was. No, I was curious about sort of the international, if it was as, the fervor was as intense as it was here. I mean, I wasn't even in New York. I was in Los Angeles, and it was all we could talk about. I mean, it was really like, you know, we congregated around these games when they weren't playing. That's all we were talking about on social media. It's just every conversation was like, so it's kind of fun to hear that it was also had an international flavor.
I'm sure it was like blow your mind off the hook crazy in LA, the mecca of basketball, Staples Center. But in Taiwan, I want to refer to an event because I host events, right? So when all these NBA players come, or tennis players or track athletes, they come to Taiwan, they come to Asia, I do all these events and I host it. And if, you know, there's when LeBron comes, there's this fever pitch. When KD comes, Kyrie comes, and then when Kobe comes, it takes it to a next level. And like I said before, the craziest event I've ever done was Michael Jordan, and it was just crazy. He would be in a car. There was like 10,000 people on the street. You know, the government security had to shut it down. People climbed onto the street lights. People were hanging on these sky bridges. It was nuts. Okay. So when Jeremy came 10 years ago, it was the summer right after Linsanity. It was his very first event. I believe the event now, I can't remember if that's correctly. I think it was a Volvo event. He had just signed like a deal with Volvo cars, and he was going to come. And you know, there's a lot of prep work before a lot of events, and then we had to go in for a meeting and stuff. So just to go into the meeting, this is like a week before, there was like security clearance, and I was like, what are we doing? You know, and then leading up to the event, it was constant back and forth about changing this, and it was all for security. And I was just like, wait a minute, how much security do we have at this thing, you know? And they were like, I think at the end it was like 80 or 90 people. I was like, that's crazy. Is the president coming? You know? And then we get there leading up to that event the day before, and I have friends calling me. They're like, Alex, can you give me tickets? And I'm like, to the Volvo car release with Jeremy? And they're like, yeah, I want to meet Jeremy. I'm like, okay, first of all, even if I get you tickets, you're not going to meet Jeremy. You know, he's going to come on stage and he's not going to be able to meet you. And they're like, no, we just want to be there. And it was just all people from walks of life, all my friends who don't even love basketball, right? All of a sudden coming in. And then that event was just crazy. It was one of those where like there was so much security from the moment he got out of the hotel, on the comm, getting into the stadium, and then private walkways, secured corridors. It was one of those things where like you couldn't even be at the waiting area, kind of the green room, before he came on stage. It was just fever pitch. It was awesome to see, because then you realize, man, our boy did it. Our boy hit it. He's big. He's Michael Jordan, man.
Yeah.
This is Michael Jordan. This is Michael Jordan's security detail. And then you just realize it was awesome to see. It was so happy. And then I think Cary preached upon it. As a professional, like I've hosted all these events, and I don't really sit there and get super juiced excited. But when I saw Jeremy, I was like, I don't know what is happening. I was like butterflies in my stomach. And I was just like, Jeremy, man, can I get a picture with you? And I couldn't believe I said that. I don't ask like all these athletes, but I said, you know what? This is one of those moments where I just felt so proud.
Yeah.
I just kind of get a picture with you. It was awesome.
Right.
It was one of those things all over Taiwan. And then, you know, people, I think I transcended it. People in Japan, my friends were calling me, people in Korea and Hong Kong. It was super cool.
I want to shout out somebody in the chat, Walter Ho in the chat, who said, who kind of sums it up. He's like, Linsanity was the only time my mother called me to talk hoops. And I mean, I feel like that's a sentiment for a lot of people. Like, he transcended sports fans. Like, the fever grew. And a lot of people who do not normally watch sports, basketball, they caught the fever too. And so you had grandmas, you had moms and grandmas being like, did you see Jeremy? Like, when's Jeremy on? You know, like,
Phil, I mean, it's so funny that you bring this up because I always tell my friends many years ago, there's if you wake up in the morning in Taipei, like if you get up at 5, 6 in the morning, there's all these grandmas and grandpas that do voluntary work and they sweep the streets. So every morning you wake up, the streets of Taipei are clean. It's these grandmas, they just sweep. I remember getting up one morning and then one of the grandmas were like, Jeremy Lin 要来了. Like, Jeremy Lin is coming to Taiwan. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, are you 你要主持吗? Are you hosting it? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, can you give me his signature? You know, it was one of those things where like, I had to take a double take. And I was just like, this grandma sweeping the streets. If I asked her who Kobe was, she'd be like, huh? If I asked her who LeBron or Kevin Durant was or Serena Williams, she'd be like, what? But she was like, Jeremy is coming. You know, it was one of those moments where I knew, man, this grandma knows Jeremy's coming. Everybody knows. It's just a great moment, like Walter said. It united everybody.
all right, Alex, we have our filmmakers jumping in on the on the screen. So I think this is going to end our segment, but you're welcome to stay on actually and
no problem. We gotta leave it to the guys. We gotta leave it to the guys that brought in Linsanity, and it's a fantastic thing to look back upon it. It's a great moment, and we look forward to Jeremy's still balling. He's just balling in a different hood. You know, he's balling and he's doing his thing, and we're so proud that he brought this to us and we support him. And thank you, Phil, and thank you all the panelists.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex. That brings us to our filmmakers. I want to welcome Brian Yang, producer of Linsanity, Evan Jackson Leong, director of Linsanity, and Christopher Chen, producer. What's up, guys?
Yo, what's up, Phil?
I think we're like 2 miles from each other right now, by the way.
I think you're down the street. Yeah. This other thing I wanted to bring up actually, the only thing I can liken Linsanity to now at this moment is when BTS was performing on Saturday Night Live. My mom that day was like, "Hey, what channel is Saturday Night Live on, and where can I watch that?" And I was like, that's kind of like Linsanity. Like, if you want to transpose that effect to Linsanity 10 years ago.
I'm not arguing Linsanity might be bigger than BTS.
You think so? There's no way to know. Okay.
Not.
My first question for you guys actually is a question that everybody probably asked you regarding this documentary. Like, when did you guys know? You know what I mean? Because everybody knows you were following Jeremy before this all happened. So when did you get on the Jeremy Lin train?
Well, I think we all actually had different entry points. I've known Chris for a long time, all the way back to the Yao Ming years. This gentleman on the far left or right, depending on your viewpoint, he produced a film called Year of the Yao. He was involved with a documentary about Yao Ming's first year in the NBA. And I got to know him through that journey, helping promote it a little bit through an organization in New York that I used to run called the Dream League. And I know there's some people in the chat that were part of that. It was an Asian American basketball league, something that I grew up immersed in. And we helped promote that movie, got to know Chris, and then fast forward, like, I don't know, 6, 7 years later, when Jeremy was in college, all of us he like some of the other panelists said, you know, because we're hoop heads, we heard about Jeremy. Actually, I think we all heard about him at Palo Alto because we're actually all from the Bay Area, and he had won, State Player of the Year and led Palo Alto to the state championship. So even that going just to top Ronnie and the rest of them, we were like on that Jeremy Lin train from the high school years. But then in college, as we started to monitor it a little bit more, we just started, being filmmakers. We're like, what if we stuck a camera on this guy? But these two had their own, I'll let them tell the story about the infamous breakfast that was written about in the New York Times. So
Yeah, well, I mean, the original question was when do we jump on, right? And then I think, when do we know, right? And I knew right away. I knew in Harvard he was going to do all this. No, I didn't know anything. We didn't know any of this. Me and Chris, we had breakfast one time. And he's like, I eat breakfast. And we're like, all right, let's go have breakfast. And on Sunset, we had the griddle. We ordered pancakes, waffles, all this stuff. And he's like, I got this documentary for you. I got this Asian kid at Harvard. And I was like, oh man, is he 7'6"? Like, yeah. Is that the only reason why we're doing this? He's like, no, he's a point guard. He can shoot. He drives. I said, can he dunk though? And he was like, yeah, he could dunk. And I was like, let's do a documentary about him. Because that's all I need to see. Because I never seen Asian dude dunk before like that. And Chris, anything?
Yeah, I mean, look, as Brian said, we're all hoop heads. So even if there's an Asian name in a box score somewhere, it's like, yo, check this kid out. So, we were definitely early on, but Jeremy had something special, I think, that we all recognized. And when we got together, I started talking to Evan. Evan was in. So our time, Brian's like, oh, I've been following him too. So we just kind of combined forces to form a team to do this. And we didn't know what it was, right? We didn't know that it was going to be, we didn't know any of that stuff was going to happen. We were thinking this as a YouTube series at first. And Brian and his team were the ones that signed on to finance, right? And he raised money for this. So, we were on early, but it was, we always equate the ride of Linsanity to our film as well, because we went through some dark times, right? And we went through some highs and lows both. And that was stuff that we'll always remember.
Yeah, on that Linsanity moment, Jeremy Lin's life changed, but so did ours. So, we went from, just this tiny little YouTube documentary to the most wanted documentary we could ever hope for.
Prior to Linsanity dropping, I mean, like when it popped off, how was this documentary supposed to end? Like, what was supposed to look like?
It's a good question. I don't think we knew the answer to that, right? I think that number one, we were happy that he had a summer league that was something to write about. Okay, is that at the beginning or is that the end? I mean, we kept looking at each other, trying to figure that out. Wow, he steps on an NBA court. Is that the beginning or is that the end? Right? And when everything started happening, it's like, okay, great. Now we really have something here. So we didn't know. To answer that question, I don't think any of us did. Did you?
I remember specifically though in the fall when he was in his second year and he was getting traded around, you were like, the trade deadline's gonna come up. He's gonna play or he's not. And so we have this sort of moment to see what's gonna happen. And I think you were anticipating, and then I was in New York, Brian was in New York, we're like, oh, this is great. We go off and hang out and shoot this finally in one place.
Yeah, I think that without the, hindsight is always 2020, but as it was happening, we were thinking, as it was said at the top, Jeremy's message, this is supposed to be a YouTube series. YouTube at that time had, the YouTube influencer space and platforms like Yum Yum F were just being born. And we were looking at this as like a 5-part webisode series that would document Jeremy's rise from, we actually approached him when he was in Harvard. We handed him a prospectus and said, hey, Jeremy, we have this idea. We'd love to like tag along with you as you go from, here from Cambridge, potentially into the NBA. And if you don't wind up, if nothing happens, the risk is, we'll absorb that risk financially, whatever it was. And if nothing happens of significance, it'll be a great, like it'll live on a hard drive and be some good memories for you to look back on. And at that time, he was like, "You crazy?"
Jeremy thought Brian was a creepy old man.
Yeah, because it's a fine line between like persistence and creepiness, right? So I was walking that line. and
Can we shoot video of you, young man?
Yeah. So he didn't say yes when he was in Harvard. But once he got in,
But we shot anyway.
Yeah, you still shot
We did shoot anyway.
because it's because you can just film a game if you want.
There's unauthorized footage, and Phil, I'll have you know, like there's a game at Columbia, New York that was his senior season that was chock. I know a bunch of people on the chat room were probably at that game. Your very good friend who, shameless plug on your upcoming book, I have to do it for you, but Rise, you and Jeff was at that game. I saw anyone was sort of like a who's who of like the Asian American, community had to, at that point, go see the Jeremy Lin show as it was billed when he was in college. They had t-shirts that I remember, they rocked, said Jeremy Lin show was, a couple of years before Linsanity. And we were filming that, the unauthorized footage. So yeah, we didn't know what was obviously we had no idea 2012, February, 10 years ago that what happened would happen. But for us, we always say this, the Jeremy's journey of being like a pioneer, like a modern day Asian American, just getting to the NBA, signs a contract, gets onto the court as an NBA player, that fade to black. That was enough, right? Because we had
a great ending.
Yeah, that was our ending at that point. Then of course, February.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where were you? My question: where were you all on February 4th, 2012? That night.
I was in the office. I'm in Los Angeles, and when things were happening, I was in a meeting, and my phone was just zzz, 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 zzz. I was like, I'm in a meeting, so I didn't pick up my phone. And when the meeting was over, I probably had 100 text messages. Oh, did you see that? Did you see that? Okay, great. He had a game. Maybe we can end it there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. We have an ending.
And that's where I was. So I was on Pacific time, 3 hours behind. And I didn't watch the game, frankly, right? Because it was ahead of me.
Yeah,
Where were you guys?
I was in LA at the time for the New Jersey Nets game. And I remember I was at the gym and my phone, the same. And then the best I could do was get onto ESPN, the web, and track it. And then just going, holy effing, remember calling these guys like, what is happening, right? And then I think within the week I was on a plane because we had to get there. I think it was the second game was against Utah. And then the third game, I believe, was the third or fourth game was the Laker game. And I was back in New York by that time. Evan was filming with Jeremy, like the night before the Lakers game. He was doing laundry at his brother's house. Like, we had the access and we were like messaging with Jeremy. Like, he was like, I mean, what the heck? I mean, I still thinking back, it was just delirium, like literally, like having a front row seat.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we echo the same point that we all felt, right? I mean, we can tell every single person on this Zoom, and if you were an Asian American on any level, you felt something special then, right? It was a dream. I mean, like you said, it was literally a dream at that moment. I mean, I remember, the first time it happened, yeah, I get the text from these guys. I'm like, oh, all right, we have an ending. And I think the whole experience of it was just, to be that close to him, and to be experienced that, and also just be like, I remember I was a little camera trying to tell the story. It was the best seat in the house.
Were you guys at Madison Square Garden for the Laker game?
I was.
You were.
Yeah. We were. We filmed before the game outside. couldn't go in and have access, but there was pandemonium outside. I remember bringing, we had our crew out there. It was capturing, just the feeling and the atmosphere.
So one of the strategies we took when we shot the film was we don't need to shoot any game footage, right? There's 100 cameras inside each NBA arena. We can figure out how to get that. As Brian mentioned, I have a prior relationship with the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
So I had asked them to put cameras on Jeremy for me, even prior to Linsanity. So that's how we got a lot of that footage. The footage that we shot was those intimate scenes at his house, doing laundry, when he was down. Like, that's the stuff that we shot, and we pushed that together with the game footage, because the game footage, again, we can get that at some point, and being on a limited budget, it's not something that we can shoot every game, right? That's not going to be feasible.
Yeah.
So I think that Laker game was very special.
I rewatched Linsanity. I rewatched the documentary last night. The Kobe stuff now, like I'm I always appreciate Kobe for being the role that he played in the Linsanity story, in that he was ostensibly a villain, right? Or like this insurmountable odd that Jeremy had to face, right, when it came down to that game. So I appreciate Kobe. When he passed, I appreciated his sort of role in the Jeremy Lin story. So seeing him in the documentary was like, it kind of struck me. The other one is there's a shot of Michael K. Williams in the documentary as well. Like, he's on the floor. he's which also like haunted me a little bit too. I mean, that's just a side observation. I want to know about what's that?
You're in the doc as well.
I should have said up top. Thanks for putting me in the documentary. I sometimes forget that I am in the documentary. Honestly, like we rewatched it last night, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the part where I come up. The
most unangry that you've ever been.
Yeah. It's also like was shot at my old apartment now, and I'm like, oh, I missed that bookshelf. That was a dope bookshelf. So leading up to this conversation, we kept on getting hints and drops of like, what's the stuff that didn't make it into this documentary that is so that I don't know, for whatever reason was left out. I don't know. Maybe you could drop some for the super fans. Like, maybe you could drop some kind of some behind the scenes tidbits of things that didn't make it in, you couldn't put in for some reason, or you had to take out, or I don't know, like, spill the tea, man.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's some footage that is available to watch now. So if you guys, shameless, plug, get the film on Montage, you'll be able to see some interviews that were left on the cutting room floor. Great interviews with some luminaries like Daniel Wu, Dr. Harry Edwards, John Cho. Just couldn't make them work in the interview in the doc, but so that's available to watch now, going forward anytime. But as far as like other stuff that I mean, a couple of things that stick to me were obviously when we were pitching this doc before Jeremy blew up, because we talked to a couple of companies and potential partners. It was always like oh, hey, that's cute, or like, oh, it's interesting, but there's really no like, there's nothing substantial here, unfortunately, right? They say it in their very nice way. And then obviously when Jeremy went on his incredible run, I mean, this is like, it's classic, right? Classic Hollywood. Everyone you talk to before comes back in line and goes, hey, you still working on this thing? Like we were in your corner all along, kind of thing, right? And so look, I've been on both sides of it. I probably would have done the same, right? So this is not to like shame anyone. I think it's just the nature of business, the nature of Hollywood, certainly. But a lot of folks came back kind of, like tail between their legs and said, there were people that we talked to early and also that we had never talked to that suddenly appeared out of nowhere or unexpectedly came back into the fold. I remember like hearing stories about Spike Lee making overtures to Jeremy, like, hey, I got to do your doc, man. I want to do a story about you, right? Because Spike is a super fan, right, of the Knicks. Courtside, he's rocking the Palo Alto jersey suddenly out of nowhere. And Jeremy, every time a big filmmaker would say, hey, I want to do your story, he would be like, well, there's this group of guys that's already doing this. They've been with me for a couple of years. Go talk to them. And, I don't know nothing about this stuff, punt it over. And inevitably we would get connected to them. And everyone's like, how did you guys know? Like, and there was definitely suggestions of taking it from us, partnering with us, which is like code for like, oh, thanks, we got it from here. So, it was interesting. It was interesting to be in some of those calls and meetings, with big studios and execs and A-list directors, which, get me drunk enough. Maybe I'll name some names, but I'll leave that out for now. We were riding or dying with our team because like 3 years on the project to that point, from like the conception of it to like, actually doing it. And Jeremy, to his credit, also was very much like, I'm not, I don't care who's calling from this point on. He stuck with us. So we're very grateful for that. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say the one thing that I thought was remarkable, and he was way before all of us, was Papa Lin. I mean, this guy was filming not only Jeremy, but his brothers out of the womb. And as we got closer to them, I mean, hey guys, hey, I found a box of, VHS tapes. I found this, I found that, and just, we had so much archival. And we were saying like what got left, there's a lot of great scenes from when he was a kid with his brothers that we just couldn't make it in the film, right? I mean, that section of the film could have been so much longer, but Papa Lin was certainly prophetic and knew this was going to happen before any of us.
Yeah, I think even the more the footage is so good.
I want to shout out Josh Fan in the chat because he shouts out Papa Lin's hook shot. So I'm just wanted to.
Yes, he did.
Josh was an associate producer on this movie, for those who didn't know.
Josh was integral to this project. We couldn't have done it without Josh.
Josh is his best on-screen moment is the hot dog costume in my opinion. So
yeah, we never even got in trouble with Target about that one.
Yeah,
it just shot there.
Josh fans, haters. Is there something you guys would do differently about the documentary? If you guys could go back and re-edit.
You know what? I watched it. I don't usually watch my old work, but I watched this, I think, maybe about a year ago, and I realized like, oh, this is, it's hard to watch your own work. It's hard to watch anything that you create. And I think for me, when I watch it now, I have enough distance and look at it like it's perfect the way it is, because that's an amazing reflection of who we were at that moment. Me, Chris, and Brian, Jeremy. It was what we were even as a community, right? I mean, me and you, Phil, we were. I went to your house to interview you. We had no lights. It was just shot with my little tripod, my camera, and I was like, all right, let's just shoot this and figure out this interview, which is, such a reflection of that moment in our community. I mean, now look, we got podcasts, we got all sorts of things that kind of changed the game for us. But, for me, I look at that and, with all its faults that I feel, all the things that I think it's perfect for what it was at that moment. And, I've always wanted to make sure that we made a film that we could watch in 30 years, in 50 years, something that we could always come back and remember that moment of Linsanity. And, I'm just glad we didn't fuck it up. It's such a good story, and I'm just glad we didn't mess it up.
Chris or Brian, is there anything you guys would tweak or leave in or include something else?
I mean, I agree with Evan. It's like, I think there, as far as the movie itself goes, I don't think there's anything, to mess with. Like, Evan did a great job from a creative standpoint, capturing, the story. sometimes I wonder if that story came out today, you know, with the brought more of the rise of social media
I
and
mean, even documentaries. People weren't even watching documentaries
Yeah.
in 2012.
I mean, the movie we were on Netflix. We had a, you know, global distribution in several countries, territories. We were one of the top doc films theatrically in Taiwan. You know, as Alex can attest to, we had a theatrical run here.
Which is rare for a documentary.
Yeah, which is definitely rare for doc. But yeah, it's a story that, you know, I dare say, I bet you not everyone in this panel or in this room has actually seen yet, right? I still get people who go, "Oh, I never caught that. I heard about that." And I'm like, and I take that personally. So I'm like, I think
Asian.
Yeah, so I think if it had come out at a different time now, where we have, you know, all these, like you said, the podcasts, the different affinity groups that are.
I mean, we got Ronny Chieng.
The hashtags.
We got Ronny
Where
Chieng.
was Ronnie in 2013, right? Yeah, exactly. So, but that's, you know, you can't, obviously I wouldn't have messed with the film. It's just, I still think to this day, and in 20, 30, whatever, you know, like Evan said, you know, the movie it's eternal, it's evergreen. We hope people watch and appreciate it, you know, forever. So.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is I think the film came to a natural ending, right? Jeremy's journey is still happening,
Yeah.
right? And all the stuff that happened through, you know, he was still unwanted by many, many, many teams, right? That he's like, okay, great, we'll sign him to a big contract. Oh, he can't play, or he got injured. We're gonna trade him. Like he still went through such a journey for the next 7-8 years, right? I mean, we could have continued to have cameras on him, and he was still up and down, up and down. He's still up and down, right? He's playing in China now, which we're all proud of him for, but I think his story continues on. I don't think that has ended yet.
If so, yeah. I mean, if you guys were to make a sequel to this because this document is you're right, is a very specific moment in time. It has a perfect ending the way it is. If you guys were to make a sequel, where would that one end? What would be the thread? Would it be the Raptors championship?
No, I don't think that. I think the ending keeps going. I mean,
Yeah.
to see what Jeremy is now to what we met him as this 20-year-old that was like 160 pounds. I mean, it's amazing to see him grow. You know, it's amazing to see him become the man he's become. And I'm real proud of what he's become. He's become actually my role model now, you know, with the way he carries himself. And I think his story is not over. And I think anyone that says that one, you know, they're internet Reddit haters. Because I mean, that dude's, you know, he that's what he does. He shows up when we least expect. And that's what that's his game. That's who he is.
Yeah. I mean, you know this, Phil. He has grown in the since Linsanity, right? Into becoming such a, you know, I dare say the word activist, right? He's learned to use his platform, harness his fame and, you know, resources to advocate for the community, for the marginalized in general. And you see the work he's doing through his foundation. You know, like, it's just, I think that period was a great story by itself. But he's still writing the sequel, right? And we can see how it's unraveling. You know, it definitely deserves another telling, I think. I don't know whether in documentary format or whatever, but someone's got to write the Jeremy Lin, you know, bio at some point when all is said and done. And the guy, he's only 32, so he's got a lot of gas in the tank as far as being a productive human being, and basketball gave him that, obviously, this platform and this, like, this energy and this responsibility that he's taken on, and he's doing, you know, he's grown into it very nicely. So we're all, it's safe to say everyone here is still like cheering him on, and, you know, whatever he's doing on the court is obviously very exciting, but as much as he gave us on, he's doing for the community off, and that's kind of, you know, it's equally important.
have learned that like Jeremy's relationship to what happened during Linsanity has morphed over the years. You know, there was a period of time where he wasn't super comfortable with all that attention and talking about that, and he didn't want that particular moment to define him. What is Jeremy Lin's relationship to the film itself? What would you guys say is kind of, he tweeted about it earlier this week, so I mean, it seems positive, but I wonder if you've been able to get him to sort of talk about how he feels about sort of the how it ended up, the final product, I suppose, of the documentary.
Well, I think certainly you have to ask him, right? That's for sure. But you're right. I think he did have a conflicted kind of relationship. Does he want to be known for this moment in time, right? And you know, again, that's a question you have to ask him. But it's got to be hard for him, right? For people to for him to think people define him by that, right? I don't think that's fair. And I think that and you know, again, the film, we tried to show him on the court and off the court too, right? So, and these guys have said he's grown both on and off the court. What kind of human being is he? What kind of, so I think I think it's a larger question.
I'm sorry, I just read some of the notes on the side.
Ronnie's being an internet hater over here. So
Ronnie is putting on a sideshow right now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Ronnie's gonna
Ronnie claims he just messaged Jeremy and he says he hates you guys. So
and the sequel to Linsanity is his Netflix special that he did with them, which everyone has got to watch if you haven't seen it. It's hilarious.
If I may take a moment to plug my own work, I have a book coming out next week that I wrote with Jeff Yang and Philip Wang called Rise, a Pop History of Asian America from the 90s to Now. We do have a piece in there that about Linsanity, and those are in Jeremy's own words himself. We talked to him and we had it sort of illustrated comic style. So that's if you want to read that, check out that actually was episoded for The Ringer.
What did he say?
Last week. Was that?
What did he say?
Yeah, I think he said he hated you guys. So you know, kind of I was like, wow, that's a lot of words to spend talking about this documentary you don't like. But no, you know, and his perspective on this obviously has changed all these years later, and about that moment, and everything we've kind of talked about is quite evident. You know, how he's grown as a person, and that particular moment was a huge stretching point for him. So yeah, I think we can all look back. What's that?
The Ringer advanced preview of the book.
Yeah,
right?
that piece. Yeah, that piece is the excerpt. The whole piece actually can be read on The Ringer. It came out last week, I think.
So
a week ago.
He basically distills what we just talked about into that piece in terms of like what he went through and then processing it, and you know what he thinks about it all today. And I would put our film kind of as part of that whole, you know, the craze that when it was happening, like, oh, you know, just kind of like out of body experience, as Hugh said, you know, in the film. But then looking back on it, you know, 10 years later and realizing, you know, this was all meant to be, and I'm grateful, and I'm all these things I'm able to do because of it, right? So even though Linsanity ended, you know, Jeremy Lin as a person is, you know, even more than at that time, you know, being able to impact again the community and like, you know, people around him. So that's yeah, I think he's learned. I think he's learned to appreciate the documentary more as he's gotten further away from it, is what I'm trying to say.
The documentary it's in the name, man. It's a document. It's a document of a very specific, special moment. Yeah, I think it's time. I think it's about time we wrap this up. So I wanted to invite you guys. Any final words? Anything last words to say about The documentary,
Well,
the panel.
Ronnie's doing it all for us. He's saying sell some documentary merch. So we don't have any, but if people again want to watch the movie, rewatch the movie, see some bonus footage, we're just grateful. Thanks for taking this time, Phil, to celebrate the decade. It's 10 freaking years of Linsanity happening here at the end of this month. So appreciate everyone who's been on this panel. Appreciate Montage. Buy Phil's book. Watch Evan's latest movie, Snakehead.
Snakehead, yes.
Chris got a lot going on. I can't,
I mean, I want to say, it's crazy that it's been 10 years, and yet I feel like we talk about Jeremy Lin every year, right? We're going to continue to talk about this moment. I mean, the amount of passion, the amount of energy, just from a few of us talking here, I feel like we'll be able to do this for a long time. So it's just exciting to see that we still feel the same way that we did 10 years ago. And it's just, this means so much for, I think, just the Asian Americana, right? I mean, we have these certain moments that define, history, right? You don't look at all history when you, 200 years. This is one chapter, right? Yeah, this is a chapter. We're not gonna talk about the Asian hate, but Jeremy Lin at that one moment, that is gonna, something we'll be talking about for a long time. And I'm just glad that we was able to be that close, to get that sort of honest perspective from him, before and after.
I want to leave it at that. If any of our panelists are still on, I don't know if you wanted to pop back on and say bye, hello, but I wanted to thank everybody for being on. So Andrew, Ronnie, Alex, Cary, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was a wonderful
Thank
discussion,
you.
and
Yeah.
it was awesome to represent women on this panel. So thank you. And Chris, it's been so long. All the love to you and your fam.
Good to see you.
Ronnie is just Ronnie's in his own
He's just bombing the chat, so
space. I appreciate it. We'll release the 10-year anniversary cut if anyone wants that. Yeah, please contact us directly. And our Venmo, Ronnie. Oh, support Ronny Chieng. All right. Thank you, Phil.
all right. I think that's it. We did it, everybody.
Well,
Have a great night, everyone. Take care.
All right.
Be good to one another.
Bye.